These are the most controversial episodes in South Park ever. And believe me, there are some crazy episodes spread into the entire video. The first episode is Bloody Mary, an episode that caused a lot of controversy, especially with religious groups. The episode starts with Randy Marsh getting arrested for drunk driving while he has his son and his son's friends in his car. Again, a very responsible action of Randy. At the police station, the officer tells Randy that he might have a drinking problem and sends him to Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. At the AA meeting, Randy is told that addiction is something he can't control because it's a disease.
Alcoholism is a disease. You're sick, Randy. You're very, very sick. And just like with most diseases,
Randy starts to believe that he can't fix his drinking on his own, so he looks for something else to cure him.
Hey, I thought you weren't gonna drink as much anymore.
No, Stan, you don't understand. I have a disease that is very sick.
At the same time, a statue of the Virgin Mary in South Park starts bleeding from its behind. People think the blood has magical healing powers, and soon lots of people come to see it, hoping to be healed. Randy hears about the statue and believes it can cure his alcoholism. He puts all his hope in this miracle instead of trying to solve his problem himself.
No, Stan, you don't understand. There's a church in Bailey. The statue of the Virgin Mary is bleeding out her ass.
Randy even decides to drive drunk to get to the statue, but eventually decides to let his son Stan drive him. After he gets blessed by the statue's blood, Randy thinks he's cured.
I'm not going to drink this. I'm not going to drink this! It's a miracle!
But later, the Catholic Church investigates the statue, and the Pope announces that the bleeding isn't a miracle. He reveals that the blood is actually from the Virgin Mary's menstruation.
Bleeding out her vagina is no miracle. Chicks bleed out their vaginas all the time.
This shocks everyone, and Randy is left feeling disappointed, realizing the miracle he was hoping for doesn't exist.
Bartender, I need a drink! 3 shots of Macallan, 2 small bottles of vodka.
The episode upset a lot of people, especially Catholic groups like the Catholic League. They thought the episode was disrespectful and demanded that Comedy Central stop airing it. Despite all the criticism, South Park continued to air the episode as planned. Next is The Passion of the Jew. In this episode, The Passion of the Christ is released, and Cartman is extremely excited to watch it. After seeing the movie, Cartman doesn't take away a religious message. Instead, he thinks the film proves that Jews are responsible for Jesus' death. Cartman, who already dislikes Jewish people, is of course super happy and now becomes convinced that the Jews need to be blamed. He goes all out by organizing rallies in South Park. He dresses up like a soldier, speaks in German, and even imitates Hitler, telling others in the town to join him in blaming the Jews. As Cartman's rallies grow, Kyle has a completely different reaction to the movie. Being Jewish, Kyle feels overwhelmed with guilt after watching it.
How? How could the Jews do that to Jesus?
He starts to wonder if maybe Jews really did kill Jesus and becomes ashamed of his religion. This guilt eats away at him, making him question his identity and feel bad about his heritage. Kyle's reaction shows how the movie has a personal impact on him, causing him to doubt himself and his beliefs. Stan and Kenny, on the other hand, aren't caught up in the religious or historical parts of the movie. Instead, they're disturbed by how violent the film is, and don't understand why people are so obsessed with it. Confused, they decide to track down Mel Gibson, the director of the movie, and demand a refund.
We saw your movie, The Passion, and we didn't like it, so can we have our money back, please?
When they finally meet him, they discover that he is totally out of control. Gibson runs around in his underwear, smears poop on the walls, and acts like a lunatic. The situation in South Park gets more tense as Cartman continues leading his rallies. His extreme actions, Nazi symbols, and hateful speeches make things uncomfortable in the town. By the end of the episode, everyone's different reactions. Cartman's hatred, Kyle's guilt, and Stan and Kenny's confusion turn The Passion of the Jew into one of the most controversial South Park episodes. This episode starts with Mr. Garrison returning to teach at South Park Elementary. He was previously fired for being gay, but the school didn't want to face a lawsuit for discrimination, so they hired him back.
Tell you that back then, some of us were uncomfortable with your sexual preferences. It was wrong of us, and I want to make it up to you.
Wow, that's really great to hear.
But Mr. Garrison has other plans. He wants to get fired again, but this time for being inappropriate. His goal is to sue the school for wrongful termination. To achieve this, he brings in a new assistant, Mr. Slave.
Or as I like to write for short, the teacher's ass.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Okay, Mr. Slave, go sit until I need you.
And together they begin doing outrageous things in front of the students. Mr. Garrison tries to push boundaries in the classroom, doing shocking things with Mr. Slave that he hopes will get him fired. But to his surprise, the school doesn't take any action. The parents and school staff are too scared to say anything because they don't want to seem intolerant toward Mr. Garrison's sexuality. Instead of firing him, they keep defending his actions in the name of tolerance. Mr. Garrison gets frustrated because no matter how far he goes, the school won't fire him. Meanwhile, the boys, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Butters, are disturbed by Mr. Garrison's behavior. They know something isn't right, so they tell their parents.
It's Mr. Garrison, our old third grade teacher.
Uh-huh.
Well, he has this new teacher's assistant, and they're both totally gay.
Kyle!
However, instead of addressing Mr. Garrison's inappropriate behavior, the parents send the boys to the Museum of Tolerance. Here, the boys are taught to be more accepting of others, but they are still confused because they know this isn't about tolerance. Mr. Garrison is just being inappropriate. The episode takes a darker turn when the boys are sent to the death camp of tolerance. This camp is shown as a place where anyone who is deemed intolerant is punished through extreme methods. The boys are treated like prisoners, even though they were just trying to point out something wrong at their school.
The life choices of your fellow man. Well, those days are now over.
Back in the classroom, Mr. Garrison keeps pushing the limits, even inserting a gerbil, Lemmywinks, into Mr. Slave's body, but the school still refuses to fire him. The story starts with Mr. Garrison making a big decision. He's always felt like he was meant to be a woman, so he finally goes through with gender reassignment surgery. The surgery is a success, and he becomes Mrs. Garrison. She's excited, thrilled with her new body, and can't wait to live her life as a woman. She even talks about wanting to have a baby, feeling like this surgery has opened up so many new possibilities. However, reality hits pretty quickly. Mrs. Garrison finds out that she can't actually have children, and this news frustrates her. She had hoped that becoming a woman would give her everything she wanted, but now she feels stuck. The surgery didn't magically solve everything, and she's left feeling incomplete.
Ovaries or a womb. You don't produce eggs.
You mean I'll never know what it feels like to...
On another front, Kyle's situation is completely different. Kyle believes he needs to change his body to become a better basketball player, so he goes through a strange surgery called a negroplasty, which transforms him into a tall black man. At first, he's excited. He's sure this new body will help him on the court, but it doesn't take long for him to realize that simply changing his appearance doesn't change his skills. He's still the same player, and the surgery didn't make him a basketball star like he had hoped. Kyle's dad, Gerald, is also on his own bizarre journey. He decides to undergo a dolphinoplasty.
Dolphins, why?
Oh, you like dolphins, hmm?
I love dolphins. Ever since I was a child, I dreamt of...
which turns him into a human-dolphin hybrid. Gerald has always felt a deep connection with dolphins, so he thought this surgery would help him feel more at peace with himself. But once the surgery is done, Gerald finds that living as a dolphin-human hybrid is much harder than he expected. Everything becomes more complicated as he tries to adjust to his new form. In the China problem, Cartman becomes increasingly paranoid after watching the 2008 Beijing Summer Olympics. He's convinced that China is planning to take over the world, and of course he believes it's up to him to stop it.
Are we just gonna pretend America is going to be okay? Are we just gonna wait until they've taken over the world?
Determined to protect America, Cartman pulls Butters into his elaborate scheme to prevent the so-called Chinese invasion.
The Chinese outnumber us 1,000,000 to 1. And when their army gets here, they're gonna kill your parents.
Cartman and Butters set out to confront what Cartman believes is a global conspiracy. They go to a local Chinese restaurant where Cartman, dressed in military-style gear, tries to infiltrate the place, convinced that it's part of China's plot to dominate the world. Cartman believes that the restaurant is the headquarters for the Chinese invasion, and he takes the whole thing very seriously, even though it's clearly just a regular restaurant. Butters, as usual, follows along, not quite sure what's going on, but trusting Cartman's plan anyway. While Cartman is focused on his absurd mission, Stan and Kyle are dealing with something completely different. Both of them are deeply upset over what they feel is the destruction of their childhood hero, Indiana Jones. After watching Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they feel so betrayed by the movie that they start having traumatic flashbacks. In these flashbacks, they imagine filmmakers George Lucas and Steven Spielberg literally raping Indiana Jones, which is a dramatic way of expressing how much they hated the film and how they believe it ruined the character. This subplot serves as a dark metaphor for how they felt about the movie. Meanwhile, Cartman continues to ramp up his paranoia about the Chinese takeover.
To pay for betraying your country to the Chinese.
This is stupid. I'm leaving.
No, but
He and Butters eventually end up at a movie theater, where Cartman tries to confront a group of Chinese men, still believing they're part of the invasion plan. Things spiral out of control when Butters accidentally shoots one of the men in the groin. The whole situation becomes chaotic, but Cartman is still fully convinced that he's doing the right thing by saving America from an invasion that only exists in his head. In this episode, Cartman gets tired of hanging out with his usual friends, Stan, Kylie's, and Kenny, because he thinks they're too childish for him. He decides he needs to find more mature friends, specifically adults, who will appreciate him for how grown up he is.
hanging out with friends that are a little more intelligent and understand politics and stuff. It's just that I'm up on this level up.
So Cartman goes online to search for adult friends. Eventually, he stumbles upon a group called NAMBLA, which stands for the North American Man-Boy Love Association, though Cartman doesn't understand what it actually means. Excited by the idea of hanging out with adults, Cartman eagerly joins the group, thinking they are just sophisticated adults who want to be friends with younger kids like him. Cartman doesn't realize that the group's true intentions are highly inappropriate. He starts inviting the NAMBLA members to meet him in person, still clueless about the real nature of the group. While Cartman is busy making his new friends, Stan, Kyle, and Kenny notice that Cartman has been acting weird lately. He's been talking about these strange adults he's hanging out with, which makes them suspicious. They start digging into what NAMBLA really is, and are shocked when they find out the truth. Realizing that Cartman has unknowingly gotten himself involved with something very inappropriate, they try to warn him.
Meeting anyway. Well, that's nice because you can't go. We don't want to go. You can't go.
But as usual, Cartman doesn't listen, brushing off their concerns and thinking they're just jealous of his new, sophisticated friends. In the meantime, Kenny is dealing with his own family issues. His parents announce that they're having another baby, and Kenny is upset because he knows his family is already struggling financially. He tries several over-the-top ways to stop the baby from being born. Things come to a head when NAMBLA decides to hold a big meeting in South Park. Cartman is excited about this gathering, not realizing what it really is. But Stan, Kyle, and Kenny work to alert the authorities. When the meeting happens, the police show up and arrest the group members.
What's going on?
All right, sickos, where are the children?
Cartman is left stunned when he finally learns the truth about NAMBLA and how wrong he was. With apologies to Jesse Jackson kicks off with Randy Marsh appearing on the game show Wheel of Fortune. He's doing great, cruising through the game until the final round comes up. The category is people who annoy you, and Randy's just one letter away from solving the puzzle. The answer is supposed to be naggers. Seems simple enough, but Randy guesses a racial slur instead. He says it with so much excitement and confidence that it shocks everyone in the studio, including the host and audience. It's one of those moments where time freezes because of how bad it is. Right after that, the incident becomes a huge scandal, and Randy quickly finds himself in hot water for saying something so offensive on national television. Randy is now desperate to make things right. He doesn't want to be labeled as a racist, so he decides to meet with Jesse Jackson to publicly apologize. As part of his apology, Randy literally kisses Jesse Jackson's butt in front of a bunch of people, thinking this big gesture will fix everything. Jesse Jackson accepts his apology, and Randy walks away believing he's solved the problem. In Randy's mind, kissing Jesse Jackson's butt means all is forgiven. But Randy quickly learns that not everyone thinks Jesse Jackson speaks for all black people, and despite his over-the-top effort, the fallout from the scandal continues to haunt him. While Randy's dealing with all of this, Cartman is off on his own ridiculous journey. Dr. David Nelson, a little person, comes to South Park Elementary to teach the kids about sensitivity and the harm of offensive words. But Cartman, he can't stop laughing.
That words are like bullets.
Every time he sees Dr. Nelson, Cartman bursts out laughing at his height, completely ignoring the lesson. Nelson tries to stay professional, but Cartman's relentless mocking pushes him over the edge. This back and forth between them builds up through the episode, leading to an actual fight at the end. Cartman's obsession with Nelson's appearance turns the whole thing into a long-running gag, making the situation even more absurd. The episode starts with Randy Marsh deciding to take his Tegrity Farms marijuana business to China.
And last night, it came to me. We could grow the family business by selling Tegrity to the Chinese.
He's eager to tap into the huge market over there, thinking it's a perfect way to expand. But as soon as Randy gets to China, he quickly learns that doing business there isn't so simple. The Chinese government has strict censorship rules, and if Randy wants to succeed, he has to follow them. He finds himself making all kinds of compromises, going against his own beliefs and the integrity that he prides himself on. Randy's story dives into how companies often cave to the demands of the Chinese government in order to make more money, bringing up big questions about censorship and corporate greed. While Randy's trying to figure out how to work around China's rules back in South Park, Stan, Kenny, Jimmy, and Butters form their own death metal band. Their music actually starts to get popular, and before long, a movie studio gets interested in making a film about the band. The boys are super excited about the opportunity, but there's a catch. To make the movie available in China, they have to follow the same censorship rules Randy's dealing with. The boys are told they need to cut out anything that's critical of the Chinese government or doesn't fit with China's strict guidelines.
Talking about the Dalai Lama doesn't go over well with the Chinese.
This means they have to water down their story, removing important parts that go against Chinese regulations. Stan starts getting fed up as the studio keeps asking for more changes. He realizes that giving up their creative control just to please the Chinese government isn't worth it. He doesn't want to sacrifice their music or values for the sake of making a movie that'll be allowed in China. This whole situation mirrors what Randy's going through, as both of them are forced to decide whether making money in China is worth losing their integrity. On top of that, there's a funny subplot with Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. They've been banned in China because people online kept comparing Winnie the Pooh to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Randy, in his desperation to close his business deal, ends up doing something crazy. He kills Winnie the Pooh to make the Chinese authorities happy. It's a wild and exaggerated way to highlight how even children's characters can become targets of censorship. The episode kicks off with Christopher Reeve coming to South Park to promote stem cell research. He's getting a lot of attention, and Jimmy and Timmy, the two disabled boys in town, start to feel left out.
Why is a celebrity who became crippled more important than us that were born that way very much?
Jimmy especially feels frustrated because Reeve wasn't born disabled. He became paralyzed later in life. Jimmy believes people don't understand what it's like to be disabled from birth and thinks Reeve is stealing all the attention. To deal with their feelings of being overlooked, Jimmy and Timmy decide to form their own gang. They call themselves the Crips, thinking it's just a cool name for their group. Of course, they have no idea that the Crips are an actual street gang. In their minds, it's just a fun name for their club. The boys go to a Crips meeting thinking they'll be accepted because they're cripples too. Surprisingly, the real Crips welcome them with open arms, completely unaware that Jimmy and Timmy don't know what the gang really does. Soon Jimmy and Timmy find themselves hanging out with the Crips, but they're totally clueless about the gang's real activities. They end up getting involved in a turf war with the rival gang, the Bloods.
Holy guacamole! Freaking cripple!
However, Jimmy and Timmy still have no idea that they're part of a dangerous gang fight. They think they're just making new friends and becoming more popular. Oblivious to the violence around them, they get caught up in gang life without understanding what's really happening. While all of this is going on, Christopher Reeve's storyline takes a wild turn. In the episode, Reeve uses stem cells not just for research, but to regenerate his body and grow super strong. He even consumes fetal tissue to gain superhuman powers, becoming more villainous as the episode progresses. This satirical portrayal of Reeve's real-life advocacy for stem cell research was very controversial at the time, poking fun at his public persona and turning him into a comic book-style villain. Proper condom use starts with the kids at South Park Elementary getting into arguments about how babies are made. Cartman and Butters have a heated discussion, and it quickly becomes clear that none of the kids really know anything about sex. The misinformation is spreading fast, and the school decides it's time to step in, so they introduce sex education classes for both the boys and the girls. Mr. Mackey is assigned to teach the boys, while Ms. Chalks and Dick takes over teaching the girls. The problem is neither teacher handles it well. Mr. Mackey is super awkward and struggles to teach the boys anything useful.
And he...
Let's see.
Ms. Chalkson Dick, on the other hand, goes to the opposite extreme. She uses scare tactics to freak the girls out about sex,
Aims in love? Wrong! Sex is about disease! Here's a little picture of Herbie.
filling them with fear about pregnancy and disease. Both sets of lessons end up being way too graphic for the kids and leave them more scared and confused than before. After these sex ed classes, things get even worse. The boys become paranoid about diseases and start obsessing over condoms.
Sorry, kids, I'm not selling you condoms.
Why not? You want us to get egg?
They don't really understand how condoms work, but that doesn't stop them from wearing them all the time, just in case. Meanwhile, the girls are completely terrified. They've been taught that boys are dangerous and that any interaction with them could lead to pregnancy or sickness. This leads to a massive divide between the boys and the girls, with both sides more confused than ever. The boys go so far as to form a condom militia, patrolling the school and trying to protect themselves from all the potential dangers they think sex can bring. The girls, on the other hand, are doing everything they can to avoid the boys, convinced they're a threat. The whole situation spirals into a full-blown gender war, all because of the misinformation they've been fed. There's also a subplot involving Stan's dog, Sparky. Sparky starts acting out sexually, and Stan's told he needs to dominate his dog to get the behavior under control. This subplot adds another layer of absurdity to the episode and parallels the confusion happening with the kids and their sex ed lessons. Because of how explicit the episode gets, it stirred up a lot of controversy. The British channel Sky One even banned the episode for its sexual content and violence. Comedy Central also made Trey Parker and Matt Stone cut parts of it before airing, which shows just how edgy and controversial the episode was. Satan decides he wants to throw the biggest Halloween party Earth has ever seen. He's acting like a total diva, obsessed with making everything perfect for his extravagant bash. The decorations, the guest list, and even the tiniest details have to be just right. Satan's basically acting like a spoiled celebrity, and he's got his demons running around trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. The whole thing is a pretty clear satire of celebrity culture, where Satan plays the role of a high-maintenance star and the demons are his overworked party planners. On the other side of things, Butters gets involved in something a lot weirder. He accidentally summons 3 real-life serial killers, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and John Wayne Gacy. These notorious murderers are brought back from the dead and are tasked with baking a cake for Satan's party. The twist? These killers are terrible at baking. They fumble through the task, and their attempts at making the cake turn into a bunch of dark slapstick comedy moments. It's pretty ridiculous watching infamous murderers fail at something as simple as preparing a cake, which creates a sharp contrast between their violent histories and their newfound incompetence. In another subplot, Father Maxey and a group of priests hear about Satan's party and immediately think it signals the apocalypse. They freak out and try to stop the event, contacting the Catholic Church for help. This part of the episode throws in some religious satire, poking fun at how organized religion tends to overreact or be ineffective when dealing with real-world problems. The priests' efforts end up being pretty pointless, adding to the overall absurdity of the situation. When the party finally kicks off, Satan goes full-on celebrity diva. He's made it clear that no one at the event can dress like him, just like how real celebrities don't want anyone stealing their spotlight. Things get even crazier when Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, shows up at the party with a stingray sticking out of his chest, referencing his real-life death. Satan is furious, thinking it's a tasteless costume, but then it turns out it's the real Steve Irwin. Satan, still mad, kicks him out for not wearing a costume.
Oh, hey, Sinatra.
The episode stirred a lot of controversy, especially with the way it portrayed Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and John Wayne Gacy as bumbling fools. But the real outrage came from the portrayal of Steve Irwin, who had passed away recently. The scene with Irwin and the stingray was seen as insensitive by many viewers and media outlets, especially since it hadn't been long since his death. The backlash from that scene got a lot of attention, making this episode one of the more controversial ones in South Park's history. Cartman is feeling left out after seeing all of the other boys in South Park spending time with their dads. That's when he realizes something big. He doesn't actually know who his father is. This sends Cartman on a mission to figure out the mystery of his parentage, which becomes the main plot of the episode. Naturally, Cartman goes straight to his mom, Leanne Cartman, to get some answers.
And my friend Kyle has a dad, and my friend Kenny has a dad.
Yes?
But things get messy quickly. Leanne admits that she had several relationships around the time Cartman was conceived, making it hard to pinpoint who his real father might be. Flashbacks take us to the 12th annual Drunken Barn Dance, where it's revealed that Leanne was pretty active. She slept with a variety of men, including Chief Running Water, Mr. Garrison Chef, and even a few members of the Denver Broncos football team. This series of flashbacks helps explain the episode's title, Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut. As it becomes clear, Leanne wasn't exactly selective back then. Frustrated and eager to find out the truth, Cartman seeks help from Dr. Mephisto, the local geneticist. Dr. Mephisto offers to run DNA tests to figure out who Cartman's real dad is. The episode builds up a lot of suspense as Cartman gets more and more anxious to know who his father might be. But just when Dr. Mephisto is about to reveal the big secret, the screen cuts to be continued, leaving Cartman and the audience hanging. The cliffhanger was a huge deal because viewers had to wait until the second season to get any answers, and the mystery wasn't solved in this episode. Meanwhile, while Cartman is stressing over his missing father, Stan, Kyle, and Kenny are off doing their usual thing, making fun of him. They take every chance they get to call him names and mock him for not knowing who his dad is. Their relentless teasing adds a comedic side to Cartman's more serious search, but it's also a great example of the dark, cruel humor South Park is known for. So, tonsil trouble. Since I already covered this episode in the previous video, I'll keep it short so we can go to the good stuff. Cartman is in the hospital because his tonsils need to be removed. Like always, he's only worried about how uncomfortable he'll be after the surgery, but things take a serious turn when a mistake during the procedure causes him to contract HIV from a bad blood transfusion.
During the tonsil surgery, we had to supply you with donor blood. A mistake was made and you were given blood contaminated with HIV.
Cartman panics and becomes obsessed with his diagnosis, thinking his life is over. When Cartman looks to his friends for support, he doesn't get any. Kyle in particular laughs at Cartman's misfortune.
I'm sorry. I'm really... Cartman, I feel really bad for you, honestly. No, you don't! I do.
Finally happy to see Cartman suffer after all the trouble he's caused. This lack of sympathy really gets to Cartman. In a shocking moment, Cartman sneaks into Kyle's room while he's sleeping and infects him with HIV by injecting his own blood into Kyle.
Let's just see how funny it is now, asshole.
This scene was highly controversial because of how extreme Cartman's behavior was, deliberately giving someone HIV. When Kyle finds out, he's furious, and the two of them go on a crazy mission to find a cure for HIV. They eventually hear that Magic Johnson, the basketball player, has been living with HIV for years, so they visit him. At Johnson's house, they find out the ridiculous reason he's still healthy, his piles of money. In a bizarre twist, Cartman and Kyle are cured by being exposed to large amounts of cash. The episode of Red Hot Catholic Love starts with a major scandal rocking South Park. The news comes out that several priests in the Catholic Church have been sexually abusing young boys. Naturally, this horrifies the parents in town, especially Randy, and most of them stop going to church out of fear. They assume that all priests might be predators, and that sends the town into panic mode. The only one trying to hold things together is Father Maxey, the local priest. He's determined to show that not every priest is involved in these horrible acts, and he continues to preach to whoever will listen despite the overwhelming scandal. The situation spirals out of control as the Vatican and Catholic Church leadership struggle to deal with the public outrage. The episode makes fun of how the church handles these scandals by showing officials more concerned with protecting their image than actually addressing the issue. As the panic spreads, some townspeople even start talking about converting to different religions just to avoid the possibility of dealing with another scandal. The parents are particularly worried about their kids, assuming that any priest could be dangerous. This fear and the exaggerated response highlight the satire, with South Park using humor to point out how the church's leadership seems detached from the reality of the situation. Meanwhile, Cartman is off in his own world with an entirely different, ridiculous plot. He makes a bet with Kyle, claiming that if people stop eating food normally and instead insert it through the other end, they'll start pooping out of their mouths. Cartman, being Cartman, takes this bet seriously and starts experimenting. Much to everyone's shock and horror, Cartman actually succeeds in pooping out of his mouth, leading to one of the episode's most absurd and darkly humorous moments. As Father Maxey grows more and more frustrated with how the Vatican is handling things, he decides to take matters into his own hands. he travels to the Vatican to confront the leadership about the abuse scandals. What he finds there is bizarre. The church's higher-ups are not only avoiding the issue, but they're also wrapped up in strange, secretive traditions. At the heart of it all, he discovers that they worship a giant ancient spider called the Queen Spider, who they believe controls everything. They think the scandals can't be fixed without her approval. In a dramatic moment, Father Maxey destroys the Queen Spider, delivering a powerful speech. He tells the church that the solution to their problems isn't found in strange rituals or hiding behind tradition. Instead, they should just follow the basic teachings of Christianity, love and compassion. And now also an episode that I have covered in a previous episode, so I won't make it too long. So Cartman is always looking for ways to make money, and this time he gets a twisted idea after visiting a hospital. He sees babies born addicted to crack, and instead of feeling sympathy, he starts the Crack Baby Athletic Association, CBAA, where the babies fight over a ball of crack. To Cartman, it's the perfect sport, and he's convinced it'll make him rich. Kyle, as usual, gets dragged into Cartman's scheme. At first, he's horrified by the idea, but Cartman manipulates him into thinking it's somehow charitable, claiming they're giving the babies something to do.
There's 6 hospitals within a 10-mile radius, and all we do is pit the crack babies against each other.
Kyle isn't fully convinced, but goes along with it, unsure of where to draw the line. Cartman quickly focuses on growing the CBAA. He's not interested in helping babies. He's all about making money. He starts seeking sponsorships, contracts, and media deals, turning a tragic situation into a profit-driven business. This parallels how real athletes are exploited in sports industries. Meanwhile, Stan finds out that Butters is making money online by posting videos for a video game company, pretending to be a digital athlete. It's a playful jab at how athletes, real or virtual, are often used for profit. As Cartman ramps up his efforts, he even tries to make the CBAA official by pitching it to a college dean, modeling it after the NCAA. The satire is clear, just like how college athletes make universities millions without being paid. Cartman's crack babies are exploited, and they don't see a penny of the profits. Eventually, Kyle becomes uncomfortable with the whole operation and realizes it's all about Cartman getting rich. When he confronts Cartman, his concerns are brushed off as Cartman only cares about the money, leaving Kyle to wrestle with the moral issues on his own. And now, a true legendary episode. Scott Tenorman must die. Cartman thinks he's achieved a major milestone. He's bought some pubic hair from an older boy, Scott Tenorman, for $10. Cartman mistakenly believes that having pubic hair is a sign of maturity, so he's pretty proud of himself. But when Stan, Kyle, and Kenny find out, they don't hesitate to point out how badly Cartman got scammed. They laugh at him, which only makes him more determined to get his money back and, of course, get revenge on Scott. Cartman's first attempts at revenge are pretty basic. He tries to outsmart Scott with schemes like convincing him to return the money or tricking him into other deals, but each time, Scott is one step ahead. Every failed attempt just makes Cartman angrier, and Scott takes every opportunity to humiliate Cartman even more, which only fuels Cartman's obsession. As Cartman's frustration grows, so does the complexity of his plans.
He's a charmer, that Scott Tenorman, but I'll get him someday.
What started as a simple scam turns into something much darker. Cartman decides to go all out and comes up with a chilling idea, a fake chili cook-off. The plan? Trick Scott into eating chili made with a horrifying ingredient, his own parents. Cartman sets it all up, even arranging for Scott's favorite band, Radiohead, to show up, knowing how much Scott idolizes them. At the chili cook-off, Scott is feeling confident. He mocks Cartman once again, thinking he's tricked him into eating chili with pubic hair in it, but Cartman has been waiting for this moment. With a twisted sense of satisfaction, he reveals that the chili Scott is eating is made from the bodies of his parents, who Cartman had murdered and ground into the dish.
Chili? Do you like it? Do you like it, Scott? I call it Mr. and Mrs. Tenorman chili.
As if that's not enough, Radiohead arrives just in time to see Scott crying, and instead of comforting him, they mock him for being a crybaby. This final blow leaves Scott devastated, while Cartman is thrilled with how perfectly his plan unfolded. The ending of this episode is one of the darkest moments in South Park history. It shows just how far Cartman is willing to go for revenge, marking a turning point where he's no longer just a mischievous kid, but someone capable of truly disturbing acts without any remorse.